The Electoral College, what is it and how does it work for you? We'll talk about that on this edition of Tune In.
Hi, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Here's your host, Representative Rick Crawford.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
When Americans vote at the general election, we're actually voting for a slate of electors. We're not voting for the candidates. Generally, they're people who are very active in their political parties within their states, but usually on the state's ballot, those slates of electors are represented by the candidates.
What you tend to think about, in the Electoral College, there's no students in the Electoral College. The Electoral College is comprised of elected voters. So basically in November, when you cast your vote for the president, you're really not casting your vote for the president. You're casting your vote for electors. And let me tell you how that works. Each state gets one elector per member of Congress. So we have 4 members of the House, 2 members of the Senate. That equals 6 in the state of Arkansas. Obviously it's proportionate to population. Added up across the state, we get a total of 538 people who vote for the president. That is the Electoral College. But the manner in which the states choose their electors is different, and I'm going to talk about that. According to the Constitution, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. But no senator or representative or person holding an office or trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. What that means is I'm not an elector. Our number of our federal delegation, which is 6, 4 members of the House, 2 in the Senate, represents the number of electors that we have because that is based on population. In general, the political parties nominate a set of electors at their state party conventions or by a vote of the party's central committee in each of the states. In almost every state, it's a winner-take-all scenario, meaning that when a certain party receives the majority votes in a state, all electors from that state come from that party. But there are exceptions. Maine and Nebraska, notably, both changed their laws in the last several decades to allow their electoral votes to be split between congressional districts. Although neither state's electoral votes have ever been split, they have that mechanism in place. Michigan is considering that. They're looking at, a Republican-held legislature would like to divvy up the electoral votes based on congressional districts instead of the winner-take-all method. That's partly because of the population concentration in and around Detroit that is largely Democrat, whereas the rest of the state is largely Republican. And they feel like that would be a more fair reflection of the state's wishes. But the legislature decides to allocate electors. However they do that, once the votes are in on election night, the appropriate electors are chosen, and it's their job to vote for the president. If you're watching via YouTube or one of our other video sources, you can see on the screen right now that the certificate of vote from Arkansas for president is on the screen, as well as the names of the 6 electors. Here's those electors casting their votes for the president back in 2012. Take a listen.
The Honorable Chairman Jonathan Barnett.
Mitt Romney.
The Honorable Rita Hamilton.
Mitt Romney.
The Honorable Benny Stevens.
Mitt Romney.
The Honorable Doyle Webb.
Mitt Romney.
The Honorable Robin Lundstrom.
Mitt Romney.
The Honorable Larry Bailey.
Mitt Romney.
At this point, you might be asking yourself, what would happen if the electors changed their mind? Could they vote for a candidate other than the one that everyone expects? And the answer is yes, they could. They are called unfaithful or faithless electors. Sounds pretty bad. For the Arkansans listening and watching, you'll be happy to know that Arkansas has never had a faithless elector. However, there have been 157 cases of faithlessness as of 2015, but faithless electors have not changed the outcome of any presidential election. The setup of the Electoral College also means that a president could win the presidency, the popular vote, and yet not win the office of presidency. And if you don't believe me, ask Al Gore. Think about back in 2000. That happened then. It's happened a few other times in history as well. Now, you may at this point go, well, this is a pretty messed up process, and it's very undemocratic. And you're a little bit right there. But we also have to understand that we don't live in a democracy, even though we throw that word around a lot. We live in a representative republic. And the Electoral College is actually one of the compromises of the Founding Fathers. So we could go into the details of that compromise and why things happened the way they did, but I'm running out of time, so I want to make my final point here. The Electoral College is a good thing for states' rights and for people who live in largely rural states like we do, and let me tell you why. Under the Electoral College, Arkansas has 485,956 voters per each elector, whereas California has 705,500 voters per elector. What that means is each individual Arkansan actually has more say in who becomes the next president than each individual Californian. Presidential candidates who would normally spend all their time in big states like California, Texas, New York, Florida, Ohio, well, now they're compelled to actually focus on some of these smaller rural states like Arkansas in order to get the kind of support they need to get across the finish line. That means that we in Arkansas are in a better position to get a little more attention than we would otherwise receive. You wouldn't know it, looking from the last 8 years, but rural states have actually had a disproportionate say, a greater say in who becomes the next president in relation to the population density in our states. So in the end, what that is it's an equalizer to some degree. It's a huge percentage swing in favor of the smaller states, more rural states like Arkansas, and especially when you think about how close some of these presidential elections have been throughout history. And as I noted, probably one of the more famous ones in our time has been the 2000 election between Al Gore and President George W. Bush. We're about out of time. I want to thank you for joining us again. As always, your comments and questions are welcome. Shoot them to us at Tune-In AR1, at Tune-In AR1. Don't forget to give us your name and your hometown so we can properly attribute your comments. And once again, thank you for joining us on Tune In, and we'll see you next time.